How did we get here? Food Wars used to be one of the Shonen Jump series I look forward to reading the most each week, but ever since the Central Saga it's never been the same. My feelings about this appear to be universally shared, as during that period, the manga has been dwindling in popularity. The ridiculous premise of food-induced orgasm cooking was a great hook for the story from the very beginning of the series. Coupled with the impossibly high stakes of the Central Saga, it didn't work so well in consecutive matches. Back when we covered the arc on the Samastream podcast, we were of the opinion that the introduction of Azami as a villain, while an exciting novelty at the time, transformed Shokugeki no Soma from a sports series to a quasi-battle one, where cooking as competition does not work so well. Personal development as a cook and friendly competition can still be taken seriously when accompanied by a peanut butter squid monster. The fate of the cooking world and the Totsuki Institute? Not so much. Upon re-examination, the arc also ruined the potential of the Elite 10, the senior students who could no longer function well as proper rivals, as they had to become adversaries for the Polaris Dawn to overcome. And they had to be overcome quickly since things weren't going so great in the rankings. This ended up being a vicious circle, as the individual top-ranking chefs weren't giving enough space to be built up as proper challengers. Enter the Blue Arc, one chapter of which I have already covered on the show before I knew what its deal was going to be. And boy oh boy did Tsukuda-sensei double down on the manga needing a villain apparently. Le Cuisinier Noir! The evil underground chefs seemed like a mundane concept made absurd, which would mesh well with the type of comedy that Food Wars represented since the beginning of the series. But when the arc once again started leaning into the high-stakes territory, is when the concept started becoming just a basic, boring backdrop to Asahi Cyber and once again the melodrama around Erena's family. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk a little bit about the arc leading up to the whole saga. Part 1. Soma and Megami's Hot Springs case files. The Indecisive King. I'll try to summarize this arc quickly, because it's not the ending per se, but I think it's emblematic of many flaws that appear later on in the blue. So, time skip happens. Soma and Megami are second-year students now and members of the student council. Erina has become the dean of the institute at the age of 16, and all these characters you know and love and will never become important again are dueling each other like there's no tomorrow. Soma and Megami are sent to investigate a mystery of Hot Springs Inn's closing down. Turns out the culprit is the first of the dark chefs they meet, Monarch. This finally gives Megami an opponent that means something and that she wins against. So this, under different circumstances, I would say is good. During my first read-through, I thought of the arc as promising, but it has several serious problems that, while barely noticeable, undermine the stage that is set for the tournament arc. The first problem is one that has prevailed since Central, and is the lack of a food consultant. One of the hooks of the manga is that it shows food you can actually make at home, unlike in, for example, Toriko, where the globe-trotting adventures, hunts and battles fit more easily into the shonen staple. So, what does Food Wars do when it can no longer show you the intricacies of cooking? At least not to the extent that it would before. What does it do when expertly crafted dishes have been shown before and now character skills have increased and they have to up their game even more? In the words of Mr. Cultural Appropriation, you show them mad skills. Oh yeah, these are no ordinary chefs. We're gonna show you how weird and superhuman they are. This one can slice caviar in mid-air. Whoa! They use a bloody chainsaw, juggling bells, casual transphobia in the cooking, extreme cuisine. Oh yeah! It's not like we have no idea what to do with them, and we try to make them look more interesting with the gimmicks than they actually are. Yeah. When you set a relatively realistic tone for your series and work within that frame to make your characters seem impressive, any late-game deviation from it will be a bit off-putting. if you have to put so much emphasis on flashy knife work every match, there's definitely something you're distracting from. And sorry to say, you can never go as flashy as Toriko, so you'll probably fail to impress. Another problem is the villain's motivation, the theme of hospitality. I have no qualms with Megami showing him what the real hospitality is all about. In fact, I think that's very good, but I think there is a certain inconsistency in what Monarch expects to be treated as a king. Thing is, he makes a whole moral philosophy out of this, out of the customer being treated as a king, but he both wants to be treated as a king when he's a customer, being served food, and as a chef serving food to others. Make up your mind, mate. And another thing, Erina wants to curb Le Cuisinier Noir, appropriating the Totsuki Shokugeki system, but why? Why are cooking duels even the thing that's intrinsically tied to one institute? You see them using it at the Blue, which is an international tournament, so that gets thrown out of the window rather quickly, especially as a motivation for Erina, who already gets a fuck ton to do during Part 2. The Blue. I've had quite a few thoughts about this arc, but my investment in this train wreck pales in comparison to that of another member of Team ODAR. Let's welcome Dr. Nova, joining us to talk about The Blue.
One of the biggest issues with the concept of The Blue is that the setup is fucking fantastic. You have a tournament, not just of Totsuki Academy, but all the chefs in the entire world. That's insane. That's awesome. I mean, think about it. You can have international characters from culinary giants like Spain, from America, from England, like Italy, like France. Just imagine all the cool characters you can get from this. The issue is we don't get that. Any chefs who aren't characters already established, or the weird dark chefs, the noir, are just the same background numbnuts we've seen throughout the entire series. People are like, oh, this is too good, I need to go home. Plus, the idea of the dark chefs is dumb to begin with because, and this is my personal opinion here, Food Wars was always at its best without villains. That's why the Fall Classic was so excellent. There were no villains other than maybe Mimisaka. And throughout the entire thing, it was an interesting back and forth because you could root for whoever you wanted. Everybody had a good reason to win. Everybody had an interesting reason for why they want to beat certain other characters, why they want to triumph in the end. And it wasn't just good versus evil. That's why it was excellent. Food Wars was always better without villains. And not only that, the setup got even worse when each character all of a sudden had a reason they want to win, but there were only two characters who had actual big plot reasons to win, meaning that you always knew it was going to come down to these characters. And yes, there were rumors that Food Wars was ending anyway, so of course it was going to be Soma and Erina, but because of this, it was a lot less interesting thinking about what matchups were going to happen, because you knew it would always come down to those two no matter what. What with Erina, with the relationship with her mother, which we'll get to, or the fact that all of a sudden Soma had to say like, well, I have to do this or else I'll never do this again. The Fall Classic didn't need that. The Fall Classic didn't need, alright, well, I better win this contest, and if I don't win this contest, I'll fry my nuts off. It was just uninteresting. The arc as a whole was boring. The fact that Erina's character got reverted completely, specifically, it's irritating to me because the only really good part of the central conflict was Erina's character development throughout, and all of a sudden that got reversed when Erina's mother, who might be the most boring character in the entire series, shows up. The focus also got strange in the sense that all of a sudden there were all these different characters who were trying to steal the focus of the arc, none of which were particularly interesting. Asahi was awful, Erina's mother was awful, and there were just so many elements that overall took away from it. Is it about Asahi and his rivalry with Soma? Is it about Erina, her relationship with her mother? Is it about Asahi and how she wants to marry Erina? Is it about how Soma wants to prove that he's the greatest chef and therefore can create a dish nobody's ever made before? Is it about Erina having to overcome the struggle of her mother? Is it about these other characters like Megami and Aldini rising in the food world? And even then, it was weird how the cast got shortened so much, because characters like Hayama, and characters like Kurokiba, and characters like Alice, and even other characters throughout the series who we thought we would get something more of, like, for example, Ibusaki or other members of the council, all of a sudden were completely relegated to the peanut gallery. It's just unfortunate because by the end of the series, even the other characters who did get to show up in the blue didn't look good. Aldini got completely pantsed by Erina. Megumi just got completely destroyed by Asahi and never had a single match where we got to see how good she became. And, this is a minor thing. I understand that the food consultant had to leave. The food looks awful. The food just looks terrible, and as somebody who does work in kitchens, I can say that these dishes sound, to me, disgusting. That's another part of it. And in the end, it's not satisfying, it's not interesting. It feels like there were so many missed opportunities in what sounded like what it could have been a really excellent arc. And what you're just kind of left with is a bitter taste in your mouth. The same kind of taste you got at the end of Eye Shield 21. The same taste I know some people had for a while at the end of Toriko or Bakuman. It's just the idea of something you've invested so much time and energy into, ending on such a downer note that there's not a lot you can... And almost, to me, some people might say it mars the rest of the series. It doesn't for me. I still adore the rest of the series. But it is unfortunate when you look back on the arc and you just realize that there's so much that could have been done that wasn't.
And that's what the arc mostly is, isn't it? An unfocused mess with potential squandered by its need of a villain. Speaking of which, Part 3, Asahi, Love and Thunder. Oh, Asahi, Asahi, Asahi. If there's anyone that deserves the title of an unfocused mess, it's you. You had your nerd brain scheme of wooing a 16-year-old into marriage, you actually almost succeed, and then you bloody ruin everything by kidnapping her out of the blue, just so you can have a match in the blue, and the match determines whether she will accept your offer of marriage or not. What are you doing? You almost had this. I can't. Why would you willingly make yourself the bad guy here? Why do you keep treating knives like superpowers? Now, stop it. You're daft, Asahi. Stop being daft, Asahi. Stop it. No. So Asahi's plan of seduction, then proposal, kidnapping, marriage, profit, is informed by his need to become Soma, because he has always wished Soma's dad was his dad, and for this reason, of course, he feels the need to court Erina, despite the fact that Soma never did the same thing, or has shown any interest in Erina publicly. Or maybe he doesn't want to be Soma, fuck if I know. The epilogue suggests that all he needed was a family, specifically a little sister. Thanks, I hate it. Look, it's obvious that things with Asahi got kinda daft, but that too is the fault of turning Food Wars into a battle manga that needs a villain. Because now the characters in it also need to adopt a battle manga-like mentality. The rules need to change whether it made sense or not. When Dojima brings news of Asahi intending to challenge Soma to a Shokugeki, Erina hurries to find Soma before it's too late. But too late before what? Nothing is at stake here if he loses. He's not gonna be expelled or anything, he's not gonna die, but they're treating this like a battle manga, so there's this stretched metaphor of a danger that he faces. And in reality, the worst thing that happens is that he loses his knife, and that wasn't an important thing until Asahi changed the rules, because that was his deal, and cooking knives are superpowers now. And he doesn't even lose it in the end, so what? But I'd like to close this with perhaps the best fucking example of what we talked about. In the match with Sarge, she whips out a chainsaw and a sledgehammer and bloody dynamite to make a bloody cake. Then Soma says her violent methods are impressive, but he's got his own special weapon. What on earth is that kid thinking? That noir chef used a chainsaw of all things to create an amazing delicacy of a cake, yet he's intending to counter by using a disposable ice cream spoons? Yeah, it's almost as if he's not trying to physically beat her, but prepare a good dish that will impress the judges, you stuffed wankers. You know, perhaps I'm a bit of a traditionalist, but if you have that as the goal, a chainsaw should perhaps be a bit more surprising. I could imagine the peanut gallery being bored at what Soma has to offer, but not surprised. Well, maybe because I'm bored anyway. Overall, I ended up mostly talking about this one aspect of this arc, didn't I? I actually talked about what the arc means for Erina and Soma some more, and the bloody divine tongue. Oh well, I'll just have to revisit the series someday, maybe in a certain podcast that's coming up. Eh? Follow @Hoven with an H on Twitter and you'll find out soon enough. And you could actually make me do a retrospective on the series by helping me reach my Food Wars goal on Patreon, not Twitter. What am I talking about? But, like this arc, this review was an unfocused mess, so you'd be better off maybe watching one of my other videos first. Like the Chainsaw Man one is pretty good, I've heard. There are rewards involved. Oh, and what is also an unfocused mess is the YouTube algorithm, the dark abyss of sorrows and woes from which videos like these never resurface. To help me navigate it, you can subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, or share it on social media. Follow my friend Dr. Nova on Instagram to see some actual good cooking, and tell me, what do you think about the end of Food Wars, and what do you want me to talk about next? Your choices are Yui Kamiyo Let's Loose or I'm from Japan. Let me know in the comments and take care.